Hey everyone, Rho here. Before I begin today, a big thank you to Matt for the virtual gift voucher. Huge thank you my friend for the support, it is really appreciated, thank you. Now on to today, and today we continue our redemption of the Traitor Legions rankings, as the time of the Death Guard arrives. General spoiler warning to begin, as today we will be discussing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. So today we have reached our 5th installment of our What If discussion, ranking the redemption of the Traitor Legions from least to most likely in my opinion. We begun with the least likely in my mind, being Abaddon's Black Legion, closely followed by the Word Bearers. Next in 7th was the World Eaters, and in 6th was the Emperor's Children. And now the 5th place Legion in my mind is the Death Guard, our final installment before our top 4 finale. So, a possible redemption for the Death Guard. Surely the very nature of Mortarion rails against any form of redemption at all. And well, yes, I can absolutely understand that viewpoint. However, I also see Mortarion as a bit of a conflicted soul. He's always been a bit of a difficult Primarch to truly get to know. I'm really looking forward to his upcoming Primarch series novel, which I hope will shed a lot more light into his inner nature, his earliest days within the Crusade. Obviously, in having them in 5th place, I must be more positive on them than I have any of the previous legions we've discussed. And well, yes, in many ways I am. Let's start with the beginning. Mortarion's reasons for turning against the Emperor. Well, essentially you can kind of boil it down to becoming discontented with the Emperor's psychic aspect, and viewing him as a warp-tainted tyrant, akin to his adopted father on Barbarous. Sure, Mortarion was closest with Horus of all his brothers, but I don't know, for me I see this as more of an example of Mortarion's conflicted soul than I do an outright hatred of the Emperor. The Emperor himself has stated that Mortarion was made to rebel. Defiance is in Mortarion's nature. No, their relationship was never the best, but this wasn't a turning to chaos out of sheer and utter hatred. In fact, the truth was it was very far from it indeed. If we move on to the fall of the Death Guard, this was largely begun by the very early fall of Typhon, who began worshipping the ruinous powers from a surprisingly very early time. His actions and betrayal of Mortarion ultimately led to the Legion at large becoming trapped within the warp, whereupon they became infected with a disease of Nurgle, as we know transpiring during their intended transit to Terra. Here the voice of Nurgle himself would give Mortarion a choice: submit and embrace his powers, or watch his sons be doomed for eternity. To me, that's hardly a willing servitude to the ruinous powers. For all of Mortarion's self-proclaimed love of Grandfather Nurgle, for all of his so-called hostility towards his father, you absolutely cannot tell me his former uncorrupted soul would not be crying out against this enslavement by Nurgle, because that is exactly what it is. You can look at it either way. Mortarion simply gave in to the torment of Nurgle, as a certain Jagatai Khan would later taunt him, or he made a gallant sacrifice for the survival of his sons. Either way, the result is the same. He did not come willingly. And just a quick side note here, if you haven't got around to the Warhawk installment of the Siege of Terror, oh boy, you may want to get on that. Jaghatai vs Mortarion is absolutely killer. However, for this reason in itself, Mortarion deserves his placement here in my rankings for my mind. I also think it's a big reason why the Emperor himself uttered the immortal words of "someday you might be saved," because he knows Mortarion never intended this. He might have been a fool, he might have been a traitor, but he was never a follower of chaos. He never wanted to embrace the warp. I mean, it was part of the reason he became disenfranchised with his father. If somehow, someway, the Emperor's power could purge Mortarion of Nurgle's embrace, there is not a doubt in my mind that of all the demon-elevated Primarchs, he would gladly be rid of his enslavement, because that is exactly what Mortarion would see it as, with clear eyes. Whereas I saw Fulgrim as not wanting to face the death of his brother Ferrus at his hands, I don't see the same scars for Mortarion. He does not have the death of one of his brothers on his hands. He might not have had the best relationship with his father, but again, with the experience he had upon Barbarous, combined with the traits that he inherited, that he was instilled with, I really think it was about as good as it possibly could be, short of actually being on Terra together, without a crusade to execute across the galaxy. Now the redemption of the Legion, on the other hand, is not so straightforward. You never really get the sense they worship their Primarch in quite the same way as some other legions, but maybe that's just more to do with their genetic nature. Whereas some would become overwhelmed at the sight of their pure Primarch, such as we discussed for the Emperor's Children, for the Death Guard, I could understand why some may think their reaction may not be quite so visceral. However, the sight of a redeemed Mortarion would certainly be a striking difference from what they have become now. So I really would expect at least many of them to become overwhelmed at the sight of their redeemed Primarch. I know Mortarion wasn't exactly always a glorious sight, so to speak, to begin with, especially compared to the likes of, say, a Sanguinius, but he was still a Primarch, and he was still their Primarch. It doesn't matter which one of the Primarchs it was, they were all viewed with awe by their sons. And again, we're just talking what if here. The possibility of redeeming a legion filled of mutated, disease-ridden monsters is completely impossible. The Emperor in truth wouldn't even contemplate it outside Mortarion himself. Now, another big factor in the redemption of the Death Guard would undoubtedly be Typhus, who holds a fair share of the Legion's loyalty. Typhus follows Nurgle, not Mortarion. So even in the event of any redemption for Mortarion, Typhus and his first company would absolutely not be swayed by it. And an argument could be made for many more of the Legion too. And so, at the very least, even in this what-if scenario, the best result would not be the full redemption of the Death Guard. A war between those loyal to Mortarion and those loyal to Typhus and Nurgle would undoubtedly ensue. Now, who would come out the victor of that conflict? Well, that is up to you. My money, as always, is always on the Primarch. Regardless, however, with the reasoning of Mortarion's fall to chaos not exactly being by choice, I absolutely have to have him here in 5th place, rather than nearer the bottom of the ranking. I can't quite put him and the Death Guard any higher, but it's undoubtedly a well-earned ranking in the middle of the pack for me. But as always guys, what do you think? Where would you have Mortarion and the Death Guard in your rankings of possible redemptions? Do you see their dedication to Nurgle placing them more near the bottom? Or like me, do you see Mortarion's reluctant fall to chaos as a means to make his possible redemption a little more likely? Why do you think even after 10,000 years, the Emperor is not ruling it out completely? And when it comes to Typhus, like me, do you feel his loyalty to Nurgle would be absolutely unwavering, even in the face of a redeemed Mortarion? As always guys, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.